Hi guys, today I'll be showing you how to go about creating a virtual machine on Microsoft's Hyper-V platform. Now, the way I'm going to be going about this is going to be on a Windows 10 client operating system, but for the most part, what I'm about to show you can also be done on a server operating system. So the only real difference here is the way we actually add Hyper-V to your computer. So on a client operating system like Windows 10, you're going to have to turn Hyper-V on first as a feature. And on a server operating system, for example, Server 2016, you're going to have to add it as a role. So on servers, we add roles, and on the client side, we add features. That's pretty much the main difference here. All right, so first, before we can jump in here, you need to make sure you meet the requirements to be able to run this Hyper-V platform. Um, you need to make sure that you preferably run a 64-bit operating system. If you're going to be running Server 2016 or higher, then you most likely will be running 64-bit because those ones are not available in 32-bit. If you're going to be running a client operating system, just go ahead and double check it. You might not be on 32-bit or you might not be on 64, but just go and check what you've got. So once you verify that you are in fact on a 64-bit operating system, I would suggest you make sure you've got 6 gigs of RAM or more. Now, if I go look at the requirements, they say 4 gigs is sufficient, but I don't really agree with that. I've seen 4 gigs, that's really pushing it. 4 gig, no, I wouldn't recommend 4 gigs. Reason being is because the virtual machine doesn't actually have its own hardware. It's got to share it with the host. It doesn't have its own RAM. It doesn't have its own CPU. It doesn't have its own storage, so it's got to get this from somewhere. Remember, it's a virtual computer. Where's it going to get it from? It's going to get it from the host. So if you've got 4 gig RAM, and let's say for argument's sake, you take about 2 gig of that 4 gig, that only leaves about 2 gig for your host. So it is possible to run it like that, but that's really going to make it laggy and slow. So I would not recommend doing it like that. If you really don't have more resources, I mean, we're not all millionaires out there, then yeah, sure, go for it. But I would really recommend you try and push it to more than 4 gigs, 6 gigs, 8 gigs, the more the better, obviously. So yeah, a virtual machine, exactly like a real computer, except it doesn't have its own hardware. So it's got to share it with the host. The host being the actual physical computer that you're running on. So if you're doing this on a laptop or a desktop computer, that's the host. If you're doing this on a server, that's the host. The physical machine is the host. A lot of people don't know what the host is. The host is the physical machine. So if you've ever seen those horror movies where they say something has infected the host, that's probably the human being that's been infected. It's got something to do with something. I don't know. Just jumped into my head, I think. So yeah, hardware requirements, I would say make sure you've got 4 gigs or more, preferably 6 gigs. You need to make sure that your motherboard and CPU supports virtualization, specifically the CPU. Now, luckily for us nowadays, most CPUs does support virtualization, so you don't have to worry about that. You also need to make sure that your thing is SLAT compatible. So that is going to be the second level address translation that you need to go and double check. You may need to go and turn virtualization on in the BIOS. Nowadays it's not necessarily going to be a BIOS. It might be that new one called UFI, I think is what they call it. So just go and turn it on if it's not turned on, but there's most likely going to be a situation where it's turned on by default on nowadays computers. The last time I've seen it actually turned off was probably about 5 or 10 years ago. Nowadays these machines, they've all got it turned on by default, so I wouldn't worry about that. So once you've got virtualization turned on in the BIOS, or just confirmed it, once you've confirmed that you've got SLAT compatible, once you've confirmed that you've got about 4 or 6 gigs of RAM and a lot of free space on the hard drive, at least 30 gigs or more, you should be okay-ish to go ahead and proceed with this. The reason why they don't want 32-bit operating systems is because they generally limit you in the amount of RAM you've got available. So even if you've got, let's say, 4 gig plugged in physically on your motherboard, you'll see it only allows you to use 3.3 gigs of it. We don't want that. So let me go ahead and verify my operating system, or just show you how we're going to go about it. So if I go here to my system properties, there we go. So you can see I'm running Windows 10 Enterprise here. You need to run Windows 10. At least that's what some of the manuals will tell us. So you need to run Windows 10, but I've seen it actually does run on 8.1 as well. Windows 10 wise, you need to be on Enterprise or Professional. If you're going to be doing this on any version lower than that, you're not going to find it. It's not available on those versions. Only available in Enterprise and Professional. And even if you've got Enterprise and Professional, remember you still need to turn this bugger on. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I've verified I do have Windows 10 Enterprise. I do have more than 4 gigs of RAM, so that should be okay. I can see this machine's got about 16 gigs, so that should be okay for now. Next thing you need to go and double check is, do you have Hyper-V installed? Now, obviously, I've got it installed because you can see there it is. It's already open on my machine. If you don't have it, how do you get it? You're going to go to Control Panel. It's one of the easiest ways to do it. It's not the only way to do it. I can see here in the middle, fourth one from the bottom says Programs and Features. That's the one I'm looking for. Okay, and then it shows me a whole bunch of goodies that I've got installed on my computer. You can just ignore them for the most part. Then there is an option here at the top left hand side. It says Turn Windows Feature on or off. So we want to turn a feature on, and the feature we're looking for is Hyper-V. So please go ahead and click on that if you haven't done so already. In this list, there is Hyper-V. Now mine has already been ticked there, which means it's already been installed. Yours will most likely look like that. It's going to be unticked. So what I need you to go and do is please go ahead and click on the Hyper-V one. Preferably make sure that all the other ones are also ticked there. Once you click on OK here, it's actually going to proceed and install Hyper-V on your machine. So I would not necessarily go ahead and click on OK unless you've closed all programs on your machine and preferably saved any documents that's open. Reason being is it's going to want to restart, and I've seen it does not always give you the option to postpone the restart. It just kind of forces you sometimes. So which means if you've got any documents open, yeah, it's not going to be nice if you don't get the opportunity to go and save them. So go ahead and save documents, close any programs just to be on the safe side. Click on OK. In a few moments, it'll start installation and then it's going to restart the machine. Once it restarts, it's going to look like a Windows update is taking place. If you've ever seen those annoying Windows updates, it says, please do not unplug PC or turn off. Update 1 of 2 is taking place. Blah, blah, blah. It's going to be very similar to that. So just leave it to do its thing. Once that is done, you should land on the desktop. It's going to look like a normal desktop. Nothing's going to look different to you at first glance. And this time around, you'll notice if you go to your Cortana or search bar, some of you guys know it, you just type in Hyper-V. This time, it should pop up. So Hyper-V is not something you necessarily go and download. A lot of people think it's something you go and download. That's the third-party ones. So there's other virtualization software out there as well, you know, like VMware, Oracle, VirtualBox. There's a whole bunch of other ones you can go make use of. So the one I'm showing you guys today is Microsoft's one, which is Hyper-V. Yeah, so once you've added a role or once you've added a feature, you'll be able to find it. If you did not add the role or you did not add a feature, it's not going to pop up. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like once you've added it. It's going to look blank like mine. You're not going to see anything there. So if you find it blank like that, you need to click on the computer's name. So top left hand side there, you'll see there's my computer's name. It's some random generated name. Yours will might be different, obviously. Go ahead and click on your computer's name. Now I've got some free random virtual machines here. Yours is going to be blank if you're doing this for the first time. If you have played with this before or someone else has played with this before in your organization or your household PC, then you most likely will have 1 or 2 virtual machines here already. Okay, so I've already explained to you guys what a virtual machine is. It's exactly like a real computer, just doesn't have its own hardware. It does, however, have its own operating system, which is of your choice. It doesn't have to be Microsoft. It could be Linux, it could be Apple, you know, it could be Android, it could be anything for the most part. So it's really up to you which one you want to go and install. Just go check the minimum hardware requirements before you go and jump in and just install an operating system there. So how we actually go ahead and install an operating system is to go, or make a virtual machine for that matter, is just where the top right hand side here is an option that says new. Go smash that new button, click on virtual. Okay, so we're going to click on new virtual machine, next. And now you're going to be prompted with the screen that's going to ask you for a name for this virtual machine. So I'm just going to go ahead and call this test because this is just a demonstration. Maybe I should call it test VM for test virtual machine. I think let's do that. You know, test VM for test virtual machine. I would not recommend doing that, what I just did. You know, it's one of those situations where it kind of sounds like your parent, you know, listen to what I say, but don't do what I do. It's kind of like that. So I'm just calling it test because this is a demonstration. But in real life, you'll find most companies have got some sort of naming convention. So if you're doing this tutorial of mine or listening to this tutorial of mine because you need to do this for a company, I would just go and double check. Before you go ahead and just name it whatever, go and double check with a fellow colleague there or some sort of employee if they don't have a naming convention. Because quite often, you've got to name it according to the country, according to whatever state or province you're in, according to what town you're in, and according to what kind of server this is going to be or what kind of machine this is going to be. So don't just go and call it whatever. If this is for your own personal use, well, you can go call it whatever you want. You can call it Funky Banana Town if you really want to. It really doesn't matter. So next, generation 1 or 2. Not everyone's going to be prompted with this screen. So generation 1 and 2, this option just came out recently, maybe in the last few years or so, so it's not that recent. But before generation 2 was available, this would obviously automatically just be generation 1. So generation 1 gives you a lot of old legacy features. Legacy the terminology basically means old stuff. That's actually what it comes down to. Old hardware, old software, it's old stuff, things that's outdated. So if you use generation 1, it'll give you the ability to go and install the operating system via DVD or via CD using your physical DVD or CD-ROM. Now you can obviously install it on the virtual machine. You can go and use a floppy disk drive, if I'm not mistaken. You can go and have yourself a BIOS. You've got access to IDE drives, things like that. If you're going to go use Generation 2, a lot of those features falls away. Instead of having a BIOS, you'll have the UEFI. You can even see it mentioned there on the Generation 2. You've got a UEFI. So generally the rule of thumb is always choose the latest. Latest is always best. You get the latest goodies and stuff. However, if you're going to be doing this, especially for a company environment, and if they already have existing virtual machines in the environment, I would not just go and smash the latest version there, because that might give you compatibility issues. It's not supposed to, but from experience, I've got almost 20 years of experience. I can tell you, if they've got existing virtual machines in place there already, and if they are Generation 1, which they most likely will be, if you're going to go and throw in a Generation 2 machine in there, you're going to have issues. They're not going to play well to one another. They don't really like one another. So if you've got Generation 1 virtual machines in play there already, please go and choose another Generation 1 machine if you can. If it's your first virtual machine, hell, go for Generation 2. New is best, So I'm going to go for Generation 1 now, because that's what probably most people will be using. Here you get to specify the amount of RAM you want to give to this virtual machine. So before you're going to go and allocate RAM to this virtual machine, you need to know the minimum requirements. So what am I about to install? That's the question here. So I can go ahead and install anything if I really want to. So at this point in time, I'm going to go ahead and install Windows 10. That's what I'm basically explaining here. Is going to be Windows 10. I'm running this on Windows 10. I'm going to install Windows 10. It doesn't really matter. So I need to know what's the minimum RAM requirements for Windows 10. So I think they said it's 1 gig. I just have to go and double check it. But I'm going to make it 2 gig, because 1 gig is really going to make it lag like crazy. So let's throw in 2 gigs in there. 2 gigs, 2048 megabytes. And before I just go ahead and assign 2 gigs to this virtual machine, I need to make sure, do I have 2 gig to give to this virtual machine? Now you'll remember, if I checked my system properties earlier, let me go and smash my system properties here earlier. Where is it? My machine has got 16 gigs of RAM. Great stuff. Okay, so I've got 16 gigs of RAM. Let me go back to my virtual machine there. Okay, so if I go and allocate 2 gig to this virtual machine, as soon as you turn this virtual machine on, it's going to cut off 2 gig from that usable 16 gig basically. So my host, the real laptop that I'm running this on, will only have about 14 gig left to itself. So that's okay. I've got more than enough for the host. But if I was running a 4 gig operating system here, or a 4 gig machine, and I cut off 2 gig, there may or may not be enough RAM for my host. So it could potentially crash, get a blue screen of death. Some people know it. Some people know it as a stop error or memory dump, I suppose. It's got so many names. So make sure you still have enough RAM left for the host, and make sure you allocate enough to the virtual machine. Something else to keep in mind, there's a lot of things to keep in mind here, is, do you have any other virtual machines that's currently running on this virtual machine? Or this host for that matter. So I need to go and check. I'm going to pretend these 3 are virtual machines that I've already got running. They're just totally random virtual machines. So the moment they're turned off, as you can see there, their state there shows off. But if I were running all 3 of those at the same time, and for argument's sake, all 3 of them were taking 2 gig each, that's 6 gig less that I've got available. So something to keep in mind. Do you still have RAM to allocate? Maybe you've got so many virtual machines already running in the background, you might not have RAM left to give away to another extra virtual machine. Just something to keep in mind. You'll notice there's a little tick box here. It says use dynamic memory for this virtual machine. That's ticked by default, and that's actually the recommended option in my opinion. You don't have to use it, but yeah, it's a very good option to go and use. So if I assign 2 gig to this virtual machine, and this box is ticked like it is at the moment, it will not necessarily use the whole 2 gig. So that's the maximum amount the virtual machine will use. But if this virtual machine is, for example, just idling, maybe it's just running there, it's just idling on the desktop, and it's not in use at that point in time, you might find that this virtual machine is actually just using about 500 megabytes of RAM. So that's a whole waste of 1.5 gigs that other virtual machines could possibly have used. Maybe they're running on 99% usage there. They really needed the RAM, and now, well, there's no more RAM left. So I'd recommend use the dynamic memory one, which means the RAM that's not in use goes back into the pool. In other words, the host. And if they go back into the pool, that machine, the pool, the host, can assign it back to other virtual machines that actually do need it. So something to keep in mind. Next, here I'm not going to do this immediately. I'm going to circle back to this because I first need to explain to you guys what a virtual switch actually is, or show you guys how to go and do it, because you get 3 kinds. You get private, you get internal, and you get external. Very big difference between the 3 of them. So effectively, this is kind of like the CPU, the RAM, and the hard drive where I share it with the actual host. Same story. This virtual machine is exactly like a real computer, but it doesn't have its own network card. So if I would like this virtual machine to connect to other virtual machines or real computers out there, it's going to need to do that somehow. It's going to need to share my host's network card, and that's basically what this comes down to. So we'll circle back to this in a moment. Next, hard drive wise. So same story as the RAM. How much hard drive space do you want to allocate to this virtual machine? That's the first option here. This is now if you're going to go give it a blank hard drive. So if we're going to give it as a blank hard drive, I'm going to make mine about 35 gig. But you need to know the minimum requirements. So I'm about to install Windows 10. And if you go check the minimum requirements for Windows 10's 32-bit operating system, so I think 16 gig if I'm not mistaken. If you go and install the 64-bit operating system for Windows 10, that's going to be about 20 gig. That's the minimum requirements. I don't recommend you go and use the minimum requirements though, because you need to go and do updates. There's going to be updates involved there most likely. And you're probably going to want to install a program or two. You're most likely going to want to go dump a file or two on there, maybe some other stuff. So as soon as you go and add the updates, the programs, the files, and whatever else you guys are going to go put on there, you're going to add up to way more than just 20 gig. It's going to be 30 gig, 40 gig, or even more than that. So I'm going to make mine 35 gig just to be on the safe side, but you probably have to go bigger than that. Before I cut off 35 gig, it's the same story as of the RAM. I need to check, do I actually have 35 gig available on my hard drive space? Free at least. So just go back to my hard drive. Whoops. Yep. I've got about 243 gigs of free space there. So that should be more than enough. So I'm going to about cut off, excuse me. I'm going to cut off about 35 gigs of that by the looks of it. So let's circle back here. I've got about 35 gigs that I'm going to allocate. Alternatively, I could go for this option 2, which says use an existing virtual hard disk. So this is very much the same as a physical machine. You know, some of you guys, depending on how tech savvy you are, you would know if you've got a physical computer, you can take the hard drive out of that physical computer and you can go put it onto another physical computer or inside another physical computer and you can boot it up and it will actually work. So if there's an operating system on my hard drive on this physical computer, let's call it computer 1, and I move that to another computer, computer 2, and I start that operating system up there, it'll work. It's going to start up, but you just might have to install new drivers because it's obviously different hardware most likely. If it's a secondary drive which doesn't have an operating system and it's just files, movies, games, whatever on it, you can put it up and you'll be able to access it, no problemo. So it's kind of the same story of virtual machines. You can take the virtual hard drive out of one virtual machine and go make another virtual machine on the same host or a different host and mount the existing hard drive and it'll work accordingly. Same story. So the format they use, you can see that actually here in the description. The formats they use is .vhd or .vhdx. VHD is normally for generation 1 and VHDX is normally for generation 2 virtual machines. If you happen to have a VHDX hard drive, you know, for example, that you want to go to VHD, you can always convert it with a PowerShell script. If you would like to know how to do anything like that, you're welcome to let me know. Please leave a comment and then just say, hey, I would like to know how to go and convert this to that, or I would like to have a video about this or that. And I'll gladly make you guys one. And it actually keeps me occupied during lockdown, so it gives me something to do. Yeah, maybe give me a like or subscribe. That'll also help me out, I think, come to think of it. So yeah, you can go and make a virtual machine, use an existing virtual hard drive, and that'll essentially be the same as a physical computer where you just move the hard drive. I'm not going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to make a brand spanking new one here. Next. Now I get to choose how do I want to install the operating system on here, you know, depending on what it is. I'm going to install Windows 10. So I can go with the default one, which is the first one that says install later. Or I can go to the second option, which has got two subcategories here. So the second option, you can see it's got a subcategory that says use physical DVD-ROM. That's one of the options I mentioned earlier that's going to fall away if you use Generation 2. That option is not available on Generation 2. I think one of the reasons is because very few companies actually use DVD-ROMs nowadays, come to think of it. You'll find if you go to a local computer store or wherever and you go buy yourself, let's say a laptop nowadays, you'll find about 1 out of 2 of them don't even come with a DVD-ROM. They install software by downloading it or by using a memory stick of some sort. That's how we do it nowadays. Times change, you know. In an actual production environment, an actual company, we almost never use DVD-ROMs. Everything is done via network. We do some sort of network deployment. You might be using something like SCCM or Intune if you know what those technologies are. That's Microsoft Spectrum. You can use third-party programs as well. It doesn't have to be Microsoft. But yeah, for now, you can use the physical DVD-ROM like I've shown you there. Or you can use an ISO image. So that's exactly the same as a physical DVD. It's just the digital form of it, obviously. I'm going to be using an ISO image today. Browse. It's already on my desktop. There we go. There's a Windows 10 image for us. I'm going to go click next. Finito. Give it a few moments to finish up. And there we go. So you can see my Hyper-V that bottom machine there. It says test VM. That's my brand spanking new virtual machine. So that's effectively like buying a blank computer from the computer store or building it up from scratch yourself, putting in a blank hard drive. That's it. It doesn't have any operating system. So if I were to start that computer now, you're just going to see a blank screen where it's going to say no boot device detected most likely. So we need to still go and install Windows onto that machine. So how we start this virtual machine is by right-clicking on it. You can click on Start then. Or while it's selected at the bottom right there, you can go click on Start. But we can't just go and do that yet. I need to go and configure the configuration for the networking. So it's not compulsory, but it's something I would like to show you guys. So networking-wise, way on the right, you'll see there's an option that says Virtual Switch Manager. It's the one we're going to go. Now, I've got a whole bunch of virtual switches here, which you can ignore. These are just for other exercises that I've done. So if you are doing this for the first time, you'll only see the first one, or the first option there, the default one that says New Virtual Network Switch. That's the only one you guys are going to see most likely if you're doing this for the first time. So let's imagine that's the only one I've got. If you're going to be clicking on it, it's going to ask you between these three categories. What do you want? Private, internal, or external? So if I were to go make a virtual switch, that's kind of like a network of sorts, which allows you to connect your virtual machines to one another. If I choose private and I connect it to my virtual machines here in the background, that will allow them to communicate to one another. In other words, they can share files between one another, copy files, play games, whatever it is you want to go and do. But they can only do that between one another. That's it. They cannot talk or communicate to the host which I'm on, this actual physical laptop that I'm on right now. No communication can be done to the actual physical host. None. Nothing outside, just to one another. Now, if you were to go and choose that second option that we saw there, this one here that says internal, it's the same as private, but it's got a little bit more leeway. You can still connect to one another, like I said previously, except now they can at least communicate to the host as well. So on the host, via my network, I can share things to my virtual machines as well. So to my host, it's going to be as if those are actual real computers. And if you go choose the last one there, the one that says external, that's got full access. My virtual machines can talk to one another. They can talk to the host which they're being run on. They can talk to other hosts. They can talk to virtual machines on other hosts. Or they can talk to the outside world, the internet, as we know it. So private and internal for the most part is limited to the host on this host. So you're not actually going to be using your network card per se in this machine of yours. But external, to get to the outside world, for example, the internet, how's it going to do that? It's going to need a network card. It doesn't have one. So it's going to use your actual computer's network card. So that's the one. So for the most part, that's what most companies use is external. That's what most people use is external. Private and internal, that's normally used for testing purposes or, well, I suppose classroom purposes. You know, it's just for testing and classroom purposes. For educational purposes, you know, you want to play around with it. So if you're new to this, I would suggest you go for internal or private, unless you plan on using this virtual machine to go browse the internet perhaps. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and choose internal for now. Let me say create virtual switch. And then under the name, I can call it whatever I want. I can call this Banana Town if I want to. Banana Town. There we go. Banana Town. It really doesn't matter. So I normally, you can see the other ones I've called internal network, private, external. You don't have to call it that. That's just something I use. You know, I just use that naming convention to help me keep track of what kind of switch it was. But I can call it whatever I want. So there we go. Banana Town. I've seen in companies, they normally call it according to what kind of network that's going to be. You'll see once again here, you can actually choose what kind of network this is, private, internal, or external. And you'll see there, if I choose external, that's not the one I'm going to go. But if I were to choose external, it has a little drop-down list here of my physical network cards on this computer. That's because if you were to use external, it's going to need an actual network card. That's why it gives you the option. Now, I've got two here, but if you were to try and use this option, you'll find you most likely have just one. The reason I've got two is because I'm on a laptop here. So if you are running this on a desktop, you'll probably see just one. You know, something like a gigabit or whatever brand of motherboard you're running there. So if you see two, wireless is going to be the one. Physical network card or physical cabling is going to be the other one. So that's my RJ45 port on my laptop for normal Ethernet cables or Cat5 or Cat6 as some of you guys might know it. This wireless, that's the one that's going to be connecting to 802.11g frequencies or 802.11, what is the other one? A. Yeah, I think that's the one that we most commonly connect to with our laptops nowadays. So yeah, I'm currently on a Wi-Fi frequency. So if you look at the bottom right of my screen, you can see I've got Wi-Fi bars there. So that's the one I'm using. That's the one I'm going to be choosing if I were to go external. I'm not going to go external. Internal is the one I'm going to go. Apply. There we go. Give it a moment. Okay. So now I've got a virtual switch. So I'm going to go right click on that virtual machine of mine and I'm going to click on settings. You can imagine that as opening your computer's box or looking inside your server. You know, it's the same thing effectively. So normally when you open your computer's box or open your server's computer, you'd find you can see the motherboard, you can see the RAM, you can see the CPU, etc. That's pretty much the same story when you click on settings here. It's very much the same. It's just digital. So here I can see the RAM. There's RAM. I can increase the RAM or decrease the RAM, which is kind of like putting in RAM chips or removing RAM chips from motherboard if you think about it. I can add hard drives. I can remove hard drives. I can add CD-ROMs, remove CD-ROMs. I can add network cards if I even want to. Most computers physically have only one network card. But if I want to, I can add more. So you can see how there's an add hardware button there. I can go say add another network card. Hell, there we go. I've got two. Fuck yeah, why not? I've got two network cards. At the moment, both of them says not connected. You can see that. So that's kind of like when I'm not connected to a Wi-Fi or I don't have a cable plugged in if we were to compare this to a physical computer. And if I were to go and choose a switch here of sorts, let's say I choose that one of mine called Banana Town. Banana Town because we're crazy like bananas, man. That's kind of like plugging in a network cable into your computer's port or like connecting to a Wi-Fi. It's very much the same story. And if I were to go and switch to a different virtual switch, you can imagine me unplugging my network cable and unplugging in a different one, or disconnecting from my Wi-Fi and connecting to another Wi-Fi frequency. Same thing effectively. It's actually what it is. Um, now, yeah, I've got two network cards, I suppose, and I don't really need to. But in some companies, you will actually find, especially if you look compare this to a company environment, and if this is an actual server, you might find 2 or 3 network cards there, and you could be on 2 different networks if you really want to. Most commonly, from experience, I would see they're actually on the same network, and that's because of fault tolerance or redundancy. So in other words, if the one network card fails, the other one will pick up the slack, and whatever service the server is rendering will not be inaccessible, or it will still be rendered. So you really don't need that. If you're going to be running Windows 10, you really don't need that. You can stick with just one network card. So I'm just going to connect this to my one network card. I'm going to click on apply. Okay, there we go. I'm going to right click on this virtual machine. I'm going to click on start. Give it a few moments. And way here at the bottom, while that virtual machine is selected, you can see way here at the bottom, it kind of gives me an indication of what's going on there. You can see Windows is starting to boot up there. And if I were to double click on that little black screen there at the bottom, it's actually going to take me into that virtual machine. Or I can right click on this highlighted virtual machine. I can just click on connect. Either or, it really doesn't matter. Both of them will do the same thing. Click on connect. Here we go. It opens my virtual machine. That's exactly how it looks. So from here, I'm going to stop here for the most part because this doesn't actually show you how to create a virtual machine. That's just business as usual, how to go and install Windows. If you would like to know how to go and install Windows itself and how to go and configure that, stay posted. Please subscribe to my videos. Give me a like because I'm going to go and give you guys a video on how to do that as well. Why not? It's lockdown. I'm bored. I might as well. So that is how you go about it. If you would like to make this full screen, you can go click there on view. Full screen. There we go. Now mine doesn't actually populate the whole screen here because my settings is a little whack. I just need to go and configure my settings, my screen resolution, all of that. But that's normally going to go and fill up your whole screen. If you'd like to get out of this screen, you can restore it down like so. Or I can go make it big screen again. I'm going to click on the minimize little button there. And that doesn't close the virtual machine, by the way. It just minimizes. So if you check my taskbar, there it is. It's still there. There you go. If I were to click on a little cross there, that also doesn't actually shut down the virtual machine. A lot of people think it does. It doesn't. It simply just closed the window. But it's still running. You can see, there we go. It's still running. So if I were to click on connect, it's going to go and connect again. There we go. Still running. So yeah. If you would like to know more about virtual machines, anything specific, please give me a shout. Let me know. Drop me a comment. Tell me I would like to know about X, Y, or Z. I can't know if you don't tell me what you want to know. I'll make a video. Yeah, and please give me a like, subscribe, and I'll be uploading more videos for you guys. Thank you, guys.